Hello students, welcome to Byju's classes. In this particular video lecture, we'll have a discussion regarding one of the very important schemes or the project that was launched by Government of India very recently, that is the project Sashakt. Basically understand this, the banking sector plays a very important role in the prospective growth in the Indian economy. That is, the banking sector promotes growth in the Indian economy. Especially in the banking sector, the main role is played by the public sector banks. And in the recent times, not only the public sector banks, even the private sector banks have come under a lot of pressure. The profitability has reduced. Many of the banks are posting losses quarter after quarter. One of the main reasons for this particular losses or the poor performance of the banking sector is the non-performing assets. To overcome the issue of non-performing assets, in the last couple of years, Government of India as well as RBI have implemented a lot of reforms. We will look at some of the very important reforms in the next slide. But nevertheless, it is sufficient to say that the reforms are not sufficient to take care of the menace of the non-performing asset. As a result of this, in the month of June, the finance minister set up a committee which was headed by Mr. Mehta, that is Mr. Sunil Mehta, who is the PNB chairman, and asked this particular committee to give recommendations within 14 days or 2 weeks, which will take care of the menace of the non-performing assets in the banking sector. The committee has submitted the recommendation, and based on the recommendations given by this particular committee, the Government of India has launched this particular project by the name Project Sashakt. It is basically a 5-pronged strategy or a 5-point strategy which we will look at in the subsequent discussion. But before discussing the Project Sashakt, I want you people to understand some of the basic concepts, and I will be quoting the reports which are very important to understand the menace of the non-performing assets. Let's look at some of the basic points. Let me define what is a standard asset, NPA and stress asset. Whenever you read the articles about NPA in the newspapers, you will come across these particular terminologies in the newspapers. What is the meaning of these particular terminologies? Are they one and the same? Are they different? Then what is the difference between them? Let me start with the first one, standard asset. The basic understanding is this. Let's assume here is a bank. It has given loan to, let's say, a company or an industry. If the borrower makes a repayment, which is a prompt, timely repayment, I'll basically call this particular asset as a standard or performing asset. If the borrower doesn't make the timely repayments, that is, he defaults one after the other repayment liabilities, this particular account will be referred as non-performing asset. Now, over a period of time, the non-performing assets age will keep on increasing. Some of these assets will be written off, and some of these assets will be restructured. Now, the terminology NPA, I have taken care of it, that is, a standard asset will become non-performing, that is, the borrower doesn't make the repayment to the bank. This asset is called as a non-performing asset for a bank. What is the meaning of the stress asset? The difference between NPA and a stress asset is this. In case of stress asset, I will basically take the sum total of the NPAs, non-performing asset, plus the loans which have been written off, plus the loans which have been restructured. The sum total of all of it will basically become the structured asset. This is a basic understanding of a standard asset, non-performing asset and a stressed asset. Apart from this, another very important point I want to mention here is what are the different measures which have been taken by both RBI as well as Government of India in the last couple of years. I have focused on the last 2 years. The Government of India has taken a very important reform, that is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, under which the insolvency resolution will be provided within 180 days, provided in some cases there will be an extension of 90 days. But over a period of time, it has been seen that the number of companies which are undergoing insolvency resolution has kept on increasing, but the number of companies who have come out of this particular insolvency resolution, the performance has not been very satisfactory. And in majority of the cases, rather than finishing the insolvency resolution to 180 days, limiting it to 180 days, it has been extended to 270 days. So these are some of the issues which are plaguing the prompt or the efficient implementation of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Second, the Government of India has announced a recapitalization package worth 2.11 lakh crore rupees, which has got 3 components. One is 1.35 lakh crore of the recapitalization bonds, 58,000 crore worth of market capitalization, that is share of sales of these public sector banks in the market and collection of money. And third, 18,000 crore worth of the budgetary allocation, that is the government of India will allocate 18,000 crore rupees worth of money or worth of capital into these particular banks. Having said so, the issues with respect to recapitalization package is that the recapitalization package will only take care of the non-performing assets which are present in the balance sheet today, but it doesn't mean that there will be no non-performing assets in the future. What about the NPAs that will be recovered or NPAs that will be discovered by a bank, let's say after 2 years? The recapitalization package doesn't take that into consideration. And second, the 58,000 crore rupees that the government of India wants to raise by selling the shares in the market, the experts say that there is a very ambitious target. Why? Right now, the banks are suffering from losses, and usually in case of the stock market, the investors do not prefer to make an investment in the loss-making venture. And third, the 2.11 lakh crore rupees, out of which around 80,000 plus has been targeted this year itself. The government of India has targeted more than 80,000 crores of infusion into the banking sector this year itself. The experts say that this may end up being less than this. So these are the issues with respect to recapitalization package. And third, the government of India is thinking of merging or privatization of the public sector banks, and it has taken initiative under both the heads. For example, in case of mergers, there is a discussion of alternative mechanism, that is a committee which has been set up by the government of India, which is headed by the finance minister, which will give recommendation regarding the consolidation which has to happen within the banking sector itself. As per various sources, it has been estimated that the number of public sector banks, which is around 21 now, will be reduced to around 12 in the next couple of years based on the recommendations given by the alternative mechanism. And the second one, privatization of the public sector banks. Already you are reading about the privatization of IDBI, under which the government of India has targeted that it wants to sell off a majority stake, that is 51% to LIC. Again, there are certain issues with respect to this particular sale of the IDBI to LIC, but that is not the prerogative for this particular discussion. So, one, I have discussed the basic concept of a standard asset, non-performing asset and stressed asset. And second, I have taken care of the three initiatives which are taken by government of India in the last couple of years. One initiative I want to mention that has been taken by RBI is prompt corrective action, which is basically referred as the intensive care unit for all the sick banks. What do you mean by sick banks here? Those banks which are suffering losses, whose balance sheets or the financial sheets are in a very weak state. The RBI has introduced the prompt corrective action, under which as of now more than 10 banks, to be more precise 11 public sector banks have been kept. But having said so, despite these particular banks being kept under the observation of a prompt corrective action, the non-performing assets in all the banks have kept on increasing or have kept on inching upwards. And as per two reports, one CRISIL and second one the Financial Stability Report, which is published by RBI, the menace of NPA will increase in the coming year. For example, look at the CRISIL report. It states that in the financial year 17, NPAs were around 9.5% of the total loans issued by the banking sector. And in the end of financial year 18, that is in a span of one financial year, it has ballooned from 9.5% to 11.2%. And in the financial year 18 itself, all the banks put together have incurred a loss of more than 40,000 crore rupees. And there is another term called as a fiscal slippage. Fiscal slippage simply refers to, right, it refers to the standard assets becoming non-performing assets. As per this particular CRISIL report, the fiscal slippage in the last 3 years, that is between financial year 16 to financial year 18, fiscal slippage has been more than 13 lakh crore rupees. And out of this 13 lakh crore rupees, this fiscal slippage was the highest in the financial year 18, and it is worth 5 lakh crore rupees. So basically, the report paints a very bad picture about the menace of NPAs in the banking sector. And apart from this particular report, another report which is very important is a Financial Stability Report, which was published in the month of June by RBI. As per this particular report, Presently, that is at the end of financial year 18, that is March 2018, the NPAs in the banking sector were to the tune of around 11.6% of the total loans issued by the banking sector. And in a span of 1 year, it is going to balloon to 12.2% of the total advances. And RBI has also stated that in extreme cases, if something goes wrong in the market, this may balloon to even 13.3% in the financial year 19 year itself. Apart from this, the report also states that in case of public sector banks, by the end of financial year 19, the NPAs are going to increase to 17.3%. This is a very important aspect for a simple reason. PSBs occupy around 70% of the market share in the banking in India. And whenever the PSBs are under pressure like this, it simply implies that the credit offtake to the industrial level will be limited, which will have a limiting effect on the prospective of economic growth in case of India. So these are some of the very important points that you need to remember or understand before understanding the project Sashakt. Now let's have a look at the project Sashakt. As already mentioned, project Sashakt is having 5 prongs or 5-point agenda. Let's have a look at all these particular 5 points. The first point is related to the stress asset whose value is up to 50 crores. In case of the stress assets whose value is up to 50 crores, individual bank will have to provide insolvency resolution or provide for a resolution of these particular assets within a period of 90 days. That is, each of the bank will prepare their own template which will take care of the resolution of these particular stress assets. Next point, that is the second point, if the stress asset value is more than 50 crores up to 500 crore rupees. In this particular category, the project has recommended BLRA, that is bank-led resolution approach, which has to be provided within 180 days. Let's have a discussion regarding this point. Under this, there is a mention of inter-creditor agreement and lead bank approach. What is the meaning of this? Let's try and understand this. Now let's assume there is a businessman Z. He wants to start a new business. For that, he wants to borrow 500 crores from the banking sector. Rather than one bank giving a loan to this particular businessman, let's assume 4 banks A, B, C and D cumulatively will give 500 crore worth of loans to this particular businessman. And out of this, let's assume A has given 300 crore rupees, B has given 100 crore rupees, C has given 60 crore and D has given 40 crore. So cumulatively they have given loan worth of 500 crores to the businessman to start the business. This particular concept of a group of banks lending to a businessman is called as a consortium. Consortium simply means a group of banks. Out of this particular consortium, as you can see here, A has given the highest amount of loan. And since it has given the highest amount of loan, this bank will be referred to as a lead bank. Under this particular second point, it states that the lead bank must take the initiative, enter into an agreement with all the 3 other banks, that is C, B and D. This agreement will be referred as inter-creditor agreement. Important points related to this particular agreement are: 1. This will be legally binding. That is, once this particular agreement has been entered into by B, C and D, they cannot back out of this particular agreement. Second point, the lead bank will be given huge amount of powers under the lead bank approach. That is, the lead bank will decide how much of the debt is serviceable, unserviceable, that is sustainable and unsustainable, what kind of a specialist or which specialist has to be appointed to value the asset size or asset value. Third, when the sale of the assets has to be conducted. Fourth, if the sale of the assets has to be done to a particular buyer, which buyer should we sell it to? So basically the lead bank will get the majority powers in case of the second point, that is resolution of a stress assets whose value is more than 50 crores up to 500 crores. Third point is what if the asset value is or the stress asset value is more than 500 crores. In this case, the project recommends a setting up of an AMC, that is asset management company, which will basically take up this particular stress assets from the balance sheet of the bank, try to dispose it off in the market. Apart from this, it has also recommended an AIF, that is alternative investment fund route. Now please understand, for setting up of AMC, the project has recommended or the committee has recommended that the equity has to be sold in the market. That is, the company's shares have to be sold in the market, money has to be collected. And part of the investment into this AMC will also be done by the banking sector. So, in simple terms, it says that the government will not infuse the capital into AMC, rather it will be taken from the banking sector as well as by the selling of the shares in the market. Next, fourth point, in case of the bigger loans which cannot be resolved in any of the above steps, these particular loans will be referred to NCLT, that is a National Company Law Tribunal. And fifth and very important point is a new asset trading platform has to be set up, which will facilitate the sales of the performing as well as a non-performing asset between lenders in the market. So these are the 5 point or 5 prongs which have been recommended under this particular project Sashakt. And you can see that the objectives of this particular project have been met. For example, some of the objectives are: 1. Extra financial pressure should not be put on the banking sector to set up a bad bank. Second, for insolvency resolution, whenever it is conducted, job losses should not happen. And third, any measure that is recommended under this particular project should be binding on already existing guidelines set up by both RBI as well as Government of India. So these are some of the very important points related to project Sashakt. Now, having said so, some of the experts already have raised certain concerns, issues or criticism against this particular project. Let's have a look at these particular criticisms. First, there has been certain concern raised with respect to lead bank approach. These are two. One, it looks like a old wine in a new bottle, and second, there is a concentration of power. Let me start with the first one. Earlier, there was a concept of a JLF, which was referred to as a Joint Lenders Forum. Under JLF, all the lenders to a particular company would come together. That is, if the borrower does not make the repayment to the consortium, all the lenders will come together and they will provide an insolvency resolution to this particular borrower. Now, in case of the JLF, basically the concept was RBI mentioned that the lenders will have to arrive to a particular decision for insolvency resolution based on 2 points. One, at least 50% by volume of lenders must agree to this particular plan, which was referred as CRA, Credit Resolution Action. And second, at least 60% of creditors by value should agree to this particular action plan. So basically, this was a concept of a JLF, and it was seen that the JLF was not very successful for a simple reason. It was very difficult to bring all the lenders on the same platform. That is, if some of the lenders said, let's approach this particular insolvency resolution through A plan, others said, let's go through B plan, and some other group basically said, let's go through C plan. As a result of this, there was no consensus made usually in case of JLF. That is a precise reason it was considered to be a very big failure in case of Indian banking sector. And very recently, RBI has actually withdrawn the concept of a JLF in the market. Now, basically, this concept of a lead bank approach looks like nothing but JLF, only in a reformed version. The difference between the JLF and the lead bank approach is that earlier these were the two conditions, but under the lead bank approach, there is a need of a consensus of at least 66% by value of the creditors. Only difference is this, but the document or the committee recommendations do not throw light or do not give any suggestions as to how to bring all the lenders into a consensus. That is the biggest drawback of the recommendations given by this particular committee. Second one, in case of a lead bank approach, the lead bank, as already mentioned, will be given huge amount of powers to decide various issues with respect to insolvency resolution. Now, the issue is the small lenders or small banks' interests have not been taken into consideration. Let me give an example. Let's assume there are 3 banks A, B, C, which have cumulatively led to a particular businessman Z in the market. Let's assume A is SBI, and the remaining 2 banks are regional banks or very small banks in terms of asset size. For example, let's say it is Axis Bank, or for that matter, right, Punjab National Bank, or even Karnataka Bank, so on and so forth. Basically, the idea is this: SBI is sitting on a huge asset base and it will be ready to take a haircut. Now, what is the meaning of the haircut? Basically, let's assume SBI has given a loan of worth 200 crore rupees. Even if it can recover, let's say 30 crore or let's say 50 crore rupees, it is ready to forego a debt of 150 crore. This 150 crore will be referred as a haircut. So since SBI is sitting on a huge pile of the asset base, it will be ready to forego a huge amount of a debt in the form of a haircut. But the same cannot be done by smaller banks in the market. So basically, when the lead bank approach has been promoted under this particular project, the concern is that this particular project or the recommendations of a Mehta committee has done nothing to address the interest of the small lenders, and there is a huge concentration of power in case of a lead bank. Why I am referring to this is for a simple reason. In majority of the stress assets, that is more than 60% of these particular stress assets, the lead bank will be SBI. And since SBI is already sitting on a huge pile of asset, it can forego or it can take care of a large haircut. Same cannot be done by smaller banks. That is the first and second concern with respect to the project Sashakt. Third one, the concerns related to AMCs. The committee has recommended setting up of an AMC either by issuing the shares in the market or collecting money from the banking sector. But having said so, earlier there is a concept of ARCs. In case of India, around 26 ARCs are already functioning. But the biggest problem with respect to functioning of ARCs is that the recovery rates are very low, the interest rates are very low, and finally the most difficult problem with ARC was getting investors to invest in the ARCs. That is, if they issue shares in the market, it was very difficult to attract the investors. And another issue of concern with respect to functioning between ARC and the banking sector was when a bank sells a stressed asset to ARC, the ARC will usually purchase this particular asset at a discount. Right, and this particular value, that is a discounted value, will be paid by ARC to the bank, not in a lump sum but in a different manner altogether. But essentially, the banks as well as ARCs usually used to fight with respect to this particular discount value. ARCs would want to purchase this particular stress assets at a very low value, that is a high discount value, whereas the banks would demand a huge amount of a value on the stress assets. As a result of this, both the players did not come to an agreement or did not reach consensus, which basically hit the insolvency resolution of stress assets. So basically, in case of the AMC recommendation that has been given by the committee, it doesn't address all these particular concerns. For example, we don't know how this AMC will be able to attract the investors in the stock market, because this has already been tried by ARC, and since ARCs have failed to attract the investors, the committee has not explained through what measures would they want the AMCs to sell the shares, attract the investors in the market. And second, what about the disputes regarding the haircuts that the bank will be taking when they sell the assets to the AMC? The committee has not recommended how these particular issues have to be taken care of. So there is a lacuna or there is a loophole even today which is present in the recommendations given by this particular committee. And finally, the committee has used statements such as no government intervention in the functioning of the banking sector. Again, this is not a new recommendation. In the last couple of years, majority of the experts in the banking sector have pleaded the government of India not to interfere in the functioning of the banking sector. But even today, you can see that the government of India through various measures will appoint the heads of the public sector banks. For a simple reason, one, government of India has got a stake in the functioning of the banking sector. It is a majority owner or the stakeholder in the public sector bank. Second, government of India is an overarching regulator of the Indian economy, and third, government of India wants to achieve its social welfare objectives such as a private sector lending. Having said so, this kind of a statement such as not allowing the government to intervene in the functioning of the banking sector looks like a rhetoric rather than any recommendation which can be actually implemented. So these are some of the issues, concerns or criticism with respect to the recommendations given by the committee under the project Sashakt. So finally, what is the way forward or the conclusion part? So far what we have seen is the reforms which are implemented either by RBI or by Government of India are basically curative in nature. That is, they try to resolve the NPAs, but the problem is they do not have very good framework or reforms which will try to prohibit creation of an NPA. So rather than only having one set of reforms, Government of India should follow a two-pronged approach. That is, two sets of reforms. One set of reform will take care of NPAs which have already been created, and second set of reforms will try to reduce the fiscal slippage that will happen in the future. That is, the standard assets becoming non-performing assets over a period of time will be reduced. So a set of reforms has been provided here. Let's go one by one. First one, we need a better credit appraisal mechanism. That is, whenever a bank decides to give a loan to, let's say, a businessman in the market or an industrialist in the market, there is a need to go for a project appraisal. Whenever the project is submitted by this industrialist to the bank needs to go through the project, find out whether it is credit worthy or can the bank invest in this particular project. But the problem over a period of time is this: the projects are getting too much of a complexity, and the banks or the officials in the banking sector do not have this kind of a technical knowledge to evaluate these kind of projects. So the standing committee in the parliament has already recommended that we need to have a better credit appraisal mechanism. Second, development financial institutions must be set up. Earlier, there were development financial institutions such as UTI, NABARD, IDBI, EXIM, etc. The role of these particular development financial institutions was that they gave loans to specific sectors. And these loans which are given by these development financial institutions were predominantly for infrastructure construction or infrastructure projects. Over a period of time, these particular institutions have been converted into banks, as a result of which the institutional lending to infrastructure projects has declined. And the feature of these infrastructure projects lending is these are long-term loans. As a result of which the banking sector now is forced to issue loans for infrastructure projects. As a result of which there is an asset liability mismatch which happens in the banking sector. Now what is an asset liability mismatch? In simple terms, let's assume here is a bank which has taken a fixed deposit from me worth, let's say, 100 rupees for a period of 1 year, and this 100 rupees is issued by the same bank to an infrastructure project for a period of 3 years. So on one side it is issuing a loan for a 3-year tenure, but I have given a loan to a bank only for a 1-year tenure. This is called as an asset liability mismatch. The banking sector suffers because of an asset liability mismatch. How this can be overcome or reduced? It can be done by promoting these kind of a development financial institutions, which will reduce the burden of lending to infrastructure from the banking sector. Third one, a vibrant bond market must be set up or developed over a period of time. The concept is if infrastructure bonds can be issued in the market, huge amount of loans for long term can be borrowed from the market. Again, the pressure on a bank to give loans for infrastructure projects will come down. They can focus on other type of a lending. Fourth, a roadmap has to be provided by the Government of India for the consolidation in the banking sector, which is underway as of now. Fifth, the bank boards must be empowered. They should be given autonomy to take the decisions by themselves. And finally, the regulator or the regulation in the banking sector must be made ownership neutral. This was mentioned very recently by the RBI governor. The concept simply is this: whenever something goes wrong in the banking sector, all the people or all the critics basically point the fingers at RBI and blame RBI for the wrong happenings in the banking sector. The best example is the Punjab National Bank scam which has happened. RBI governor basically says that the ownership is basically with the Government of India, but the regulation is with RBI. Now RBI, since it is a regulator, it cannot enforce the laws or enforce the guidelines compulsorily on all the banks. Why? It doesn't have the power of appointment or suspension or removal of chiefs of the bank. And these are done by the Government of India. As a result of which, the regulatory imposition by RBI is kind of an ineffective imposition. So basically he has demanded that the regulation done by RBI or regulation of the banking sector should be ownership neutral. So these are some of the structural reforms that the Government of India needs to introduce, which will ensure that in the future the banks will not only be reducing their NPAs or the fiscal slippage which are going to happen, will also work out to reduce the NPAs which are already existing. This is a total discussion, or this is the comprehensive discussion on the project Sashakt which has been announced by Government of India very recently. Thank you.